a billionaire, a deaf mother, a frustrated community, and a 10-year-old who became the only voice that mattered. Graham Ellington never expected the room to turn silent the moment his mother lifted her hands to speak. But that's exactly what happened. Inside the Midtown Art Center in Tulsa, Oklahoma, on a warm Saturday afternoon packed with tension. This wasn't some fancy gala or tech conference. It was a community investment meeting with dozens of residents, city planners, local entrepreneurs, and neighborhood leaders. All anxious to hear what the billionaire was planning to do in their area. But before Graham could even begin, his mother, Marjorie Ellington, tapped his elbow and motioned that she wanted to make the opening remarks herself. That's when everything shifted. At first, people smiled politely. Some even clapped, but the moment Marjorie began signing fast, sharp, confident, the applause faded, replaced by confused glances bouncing across the room. You could almost feel a wave of embarrassment rolling from row to row, the kind that makes people shift in their seats and pretend to understand what's happening. Graham cleared his throat, trying to bridge the awkward moment. "She's saying thank you all for being here," he explained, but Marjorie tapped the table twice, signaling him to stop. She wanted to speak for herself. A few people admired the confidence in her expression. Others whispered to their neighbors, trying to guess what she was saying. And then there were those who stared at her, hands as if they were watching a foreign movie without subtitles. One man near the front leaned toward his friend and muttered, "So nobody here knows how to follow that." Another woman sat stiff in her chair, clutching a notepad she clearly wasn't going to write anything on. Graham tried again gently. Maybe let me." She shook her head firmly, even without hearing her voice. Everyone could sense her determination. Her signs were strong, precise. Filled with purpose, she wanted them to hear her ideas directly, without Graham filtering anything. She'd spent weeks preparing for this meeting, studying proposals, reviewing neighborhood concerns, and shaping her own thoughts about how to protect families from being pushed out by rising property prices. She had every right to speak, but the room didn't know what to do with her, and that made Graham's chest tighten with a frustration he hadn't felt in years. His mother wasn't helpless. She wasn't fragile. She wasn't confused. She was brilliant. She was observant. And she had more life experience than half the people in that room combined, yet here she was signing with all the clarity in the world. And people were acting like she was speaking in code. Someone coughed, chairs squeaked. A few cell phones appeared under the table as people looked down, pretending to check messages so they wouldn't have to meet her gaze. Graham clenched his jaw and forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "All right," he said tightly. "I'll translate what I can," she sang, but Marjorie caught his wrist. She looked him directly in the eyes, her expression both gentle and unyielding. She wanted him to understand that she didn't bring him here to be her voice. She brought him here because she trusted him to give this community something worth fighting for. But she planned to speak for herself in the process. Behind them, someone whispered, "This is uncomfortable," another voice answered. "Shouldn't they have brought someone to translate? This is, I don't know, man, awkward." Graham felt heat rising behind his ears. Awkward, was that really what they thought this was? His mother was trying to include them, not embarrass them. She believed they deserved transparency straight from her, not filtered through anyone else. And yet, despite all her confidence, despite all her preparation, the room was slipping away from her. Graham exhaled slowly, trying to figure out how to pull the moment back together. But the next few seconds would push the tension even further. In a way neither of them could have predicted. Graham had been in tight situations before. Board meetings where investors argued over numbers no one could agree on. Live interviews where journalists twisted every answer into a headline. Even congressional hearings where nothing he said seemed to satisfy anybody. But none of that compared to the pressure brewing inside this room, with his mother standing beside him. He could feel it in the way people leaned back, as if distance would somehow make the situation less uncomfortable. The energy wasn't hostile, just tense. People wanted clarity. They wanted to know what was going on, and Graham, standing at the center of it all, could feel dozens of eyes burning into him, waiting for him to fix the moment. He took a slow breath and whispered to his mother, "They don't understand you. Let me help." Marjorie's fingers moved quickly, sharp enough to show she wasn't backing down. "I prepared for this," she signed. "I have the right to speak." "You do," he replied softly. "But they need someone who—" She cut him off with a look that said she wasn't interested in compromise. Not yet. And though he respected her more than anyone in the world, he felt his stomach knotting. This meeting wasn't supposed to start with confusion. They planned to present new ideas to expand small businesses, create training programs for teens, and protect homeowners who felt vulnerable. Marjorie had given brilliant input during the planning. She'd been up late with him for nights reading, analyzing, comparing. Her insights mattered, but right now, none of that was landing. A woman in the front row raised her hand hesitantly. "Excuse me, is she saying something important? Should we wait or—" Before Graham could answer, an older man with a baseball cap crossed his arms and groaned. "I thought this was going to be straight information. Why didn't your team prepare for this? You knew she was coming, that one stung. Not because he meant harm, but because he was right." Graham should have arranged for an interpreter. He simply underestimated the situation. He assumed he'd translate the important parts and let his mother add details when needed. He assumed the room would have patience. He assumed everyone would at least try. But assumptions don't carry much weight when a room full of people is growing restless by the minute. Marjorie, unfazed, stepped forward and signed even more firmly. Her expression carried a message no one needed to translate. She wasn't embarrassed and she wasn't backing down. She wanted to speak, she needed to speak. Graham could feel himself getting frustrated, not with her, never with her, but with the situation, with himself, with the audience, with the entire weight of expectation pressing against him. He tried again, she sang. Marjorie touched his forearm and shook her head. Her message was simple: trust me. He pressed his lips together, torn between honoring her independence and preventing the meeting from spiraling into confusion. He looked toward the crowd, hoping someone would surprise him. Maybe someone knew sign language. Maybe someone would raise their hand and say they understood. But no one did. A man in the middle row muttered under his breath, "Can we just start the presentation already?" Another leaned toward her friend and whispered, "I feel kind of bad, but what are we supposed to do here?" Graham rubbed the bridge of his nose. The tension was thick enough to feel in the air. His mother, though calm, wasn't blind to it. She scanned the room, her eyes softening for just a moment when she caught sight of a woman shaking her head in frustration. Marjorie paused her signing. Then she tried something different. She slowed her movements, exaggerated certain gestures, even pointed to her binder as she signed, trying to help the room follow along. She wasn't giving up, not even close. Graham felt a flicker of pride watching her adapt, watching her fight to be heard. She'd always been like this, strong, focused, unwilling to disappear into the background just because something was complicated. But even with all that effort, the confusion inside the room didn't lift. People squinted, tilted their heads, tried to guess, but guessing wasn't understanding. And Graham knew something had to give soon. But before he could decide how to intervene, someone in the back of the room stood up, shifting the entire direction of the moment in a way no one expected. The person who stood up wasn't who anyone expected. Not a councilman, not a business owner, not one of the organizers trying to smooth things over. It was a boy, small, thin, wearing a simple blue t-shirt and a pair of jeans that looked one size too big. He couldn't have been more than 10. He walked out from behind the refreshment table, where his mother had been arranging trays of sandwiches and bottled water. She reached for his arm instinctively, whispering something, probably telling him to sit down, but he gently pulled away. Graham blinked, unsure if he was imagining things. The boy stepped closer, raising one hand. Not in fear, but in confidence. "I can help," the boy said, his voice carrying just enough strength to cut through the murmurs. People turned in their seats, eyebrows raised. A few looked relieved just to have something break the tension. One man laughed under his breath, clearly thinking the kid was joking. But the boy wasn't joking. He walked right up to the front, his sneakers squeaking against the polished floor, stopping next to Marjorie like it was the most natural thing in the world. "What's your name, buddy?" Graham asked, trying to sound calm, even though the moment felt unusual and unexpected. "Jalen," the boy answered, keeping his eyes on Marjorie. He added a last name quietly, as if unsure whether he should take up more space than he already had. Marjorie watched him with a curious expression. She wasn't annoyed by the interruption. If anything, she looked surprised and hopeful. Jalen pointed to his own chest and said,
"I know what she's saying."
That set off a whole new wave of reactions. A woman in the front row nearly dropped her notebook. Someone whispered, "Wait, seriously." Another person leaned forward, elbows on knees, suddenly invested. Graham tried to hide his shock. You